that, like, as a kid, you asked me like a year ago, I would have imagined that the big three are like America, Russia, and China. And not to be ignorant, I just would not have put India there because I didn't know. But now it literally looks like India is slinging past even possibly China to be the next great superpower.
The British imposed an absurdly harsh 80% tariff.
Yeah, we had a whole revolution because of this.
Which
I think this is literally the same play-by-play that they did over here in the States with Native Americans. Could be wrong with this, but this kind of seems same but different. There's a video, how British unmade India. This is one that I know I was asked to watch.
1900.
And I've asked you guys, if you guys want me to react to something, please join the Discord, say what's up, and just drop a link. Show me what you want me to react to, and I will react to it open and honestly. And I know I don't know a lot of the inner workings and the inner context of a lot of the culture and the references out in India right now, but I promise you with time I will learn it. And I just want to come in with it at the utmost respect because I think you guys have a beautiful culture. I'm loving this math, science, belief, way of life that is called Hinduism. I think it's very cool. I think there's a lot to it. There's a lot to it that I'm picking up, that I'm putting down, because I've read it in a lot of like self-help books, but they never called it Hinduism. It was just the principles and like the teachings of it. And then of course it always finds its back over here to the spice trade.
India's share in the world's economy was an astounding 27%, more than all of Europe combined. 250 years later, India's share had dropped to less than 3%, and its people were left impoverished.
Damn. What happened?
What happened? Strap in, adventurers. We're about to dive.
I'm strapping in. Gotta click it or ticket.
Into a dark and messy history. Welcome to 18th century India. In 1707 CE, the death of Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb sends the empire into a decades-long spiral. In his wake,
I like the sound effects.
An endless parade of weak princelings forced themselves upon the peacock throne. With the Mughal Empire teetering on the brink of collapse, regional powers jostle for supremacy.
Wow, this is really fast. I might have to listen to this a little slower. This is going by so fast.
Land grabs and title claims, infighting and betrayal. India is vulnerable. The situation is so precarious that in 1739, Persian Emperor Nadir Shah invades North India and sacks Delhi. During this period of disorder, the British sensed opportunity. Leveraging their unique advantages as a foreign power, they bribed and blasted their way into a dominant position in the subcontinent.
See, whenever you have an overthrow in power, it leaves a vacuum in power, and somebody is going to always take place in that vacuum, right? And ideally, or I don't want to say ideally, but I guess for the people who try to overthrow that vacuum, they want to succeed and be the one who takes place. But in this case, Britain was like, I think I want to throw my hat in the ring.
India was no stranger to dealing with foreign aggression, but the British were not like those who had come before. No. They were not like Nadir Shah, who looted and simply left. Nor were they like the Huns, who, while shedding Gupta blood, became Indian themselves. Yes, the British were different, for they saw India as an inexhaustible gold mine, whose resources were to be forever extracted.
So, in other words, one side became with the culture and fused in with the people, and the other side just saw them as just money.
By the time India won its independence in 1947, its native institutions had been demolished, its economy deindustrialized, its trade networks severed, and its people more deeply divided by caste and creed. In just 200 years of colonial rule, the India that once inspired the world was unmade. The halcyon days of India are over.
Wait, 1947? Like our time, 1947? Like 20, 40, like 80-something years ago? 70-something years ago? Like, really? That recent?
She has been drained of all the wealth she once possessed, and her energies have been cramped by a sordid system of misrule. The deliberate bleeding of India by the British was so extreme that famed American scholar Will Durant referred to it as the greatest crime in all of history. So let's pull back the curtain and see what India was like before colonialism. In the 19th century, the American J.T. Sunderland wrote about the India that the British found when they arrived. India was a far greater industrial and manufacturing nation than any in Europe or Asia. Her textile goods were famous all over the civilized world. So was her exquisite jewelry and her precious stones. So was her pottery, her porcelains and ceramics. So were her fine works in metal, iron, steel, silver, and gold. She had great architecture, equal in beauty to any in the world. She had great merchants, businessmen, bankers, and financiers. She was not only a great shipbuilding nation, but had commerce and trade which extended to all civilized countries.
Wow.
That may seem like heavy-handed praise, but the record does show that pre-colonial India was a dominant manufacturing economy.
Kind of makes sense too if Columbus was like going on, like on a boat and trying to find a new way out to India. It kind of makes sense that like you would think, why would he get on a boat and try to find a new way? It makes kind of sense if India is also sending out boats and already has a path, already has a way, and England's like, well, we can find a better way. 76 years, yeah, in 76 years we formed the UK. Interesting.
Let's take a closer look at the textile, shipbuilding, and metalworking industries. India was a textile superpower for most of its long history.
I can understand
There were
that.
many textile centers in the subcontinent. Coastal Andhra was a block printing hub, for example, while Gujarat and Bengal were known for their high-end woven products. There was global demand for these items. In fact, India enjoyed a mind-blowing 25% share of the global textile trade by the mid-18th century. This thriving textile trade had knock-on effects for the entire economy. For example,
yeah, like when I'm thinking of like shows, even like The Last Samurai, or there's so many different shows and animes where you go back and you see India in like, I guess, pre-time, like ancient times. You always see them as being like these super wealthy merchants, right? So this is fascinating.
Popularity of Indian textiles led to the creation of stable international distribution networks. By piggybacking on these networks, other Indian artisans could sell their goods worldwide at a reduced cost. Wow. As a result, many different industries flourished alongside the Indian textile industry. We know that international trade was conducted primarily along maritime routes, and so the Indian shipbuilding industry had developed into a behemoth too. A significant number of Indian ports were engaged in the shipbuilding industry. Dhaka, Mausalapatnam, Surat, Calicut, Quilon, and many, many others. Entire rural communities were involved in the production and processing of materials used to construct ships. Quality was paramount. Consider the Bengali merchant fleet in the early 17th century. The fleet consisted of nearly 5,000 ships, each capable of carrying up to 500 tons of goods. These ships were constructed in Bengali ports by native artisans who had the skills to craft elaborate wood, iron, and brass fittings. According to one British maritime observer, Indian vessels combine elegance and utility and are models of fine workmanship. Merchant contracts indicate that Bengali ships were much more durable than English.
He could also be just trying to, like hawk tool on themselves and trying to get like himself a deal. He's like, hey, they make some really good ships. That'd be really great if I could buy one at a discount.
Ships. Bengali ships had an average lifespan exceeding 20 years, while English ships were not known to last more than 12. Quite a difference. India was a longtime pioneer in the global steel industry. As early as the 6th century CE, crucible-formed steel, which came to be known as Wootz or Damascus steel in the West, was being produced for export by Indian blacksmiths, particularly along the Malabar coast and in the Deccan. Arab and European officers regularly imported blades from India. While these blades were purchased as wartime implements, they were so robust and beautifully crafted that they also served as a mark of high status in times of peace. Though we've barely scratched the surface, it should already be clear that India was a manufacturing juggernaut, a thriving exporter of high-quality goods to markets throughout the world.
UK is less powerful than us, holding less economical, I'm going to put status in there, than us now. In the 76 years, we are becoming the next superpower. This is what literally I was saying this last night, that like as a kid, you asked me like a year ago, I would have imagined that the big three are like America, Russia, and China. And not to be ignorant, I just would not have put India there because I didn't know. But now it literally looks like India is slinging past even possibly China to be the next great superpower. And to me, the thing that I'm most fascinated by it is that you guys have such a young population. Like the average population there is like 27.5. That's the age, right? So that group now is getting to the age where they're maturing, getting put into positions where they can make change. And now with the internet, we're more connected than we ever have. So this global culture that is being interwoven. Currently, India may not have like the best quote unquote online image, but I really think in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, that's going to be in the past, right? Because everyone's going to see how stupid and ignorant it is. And we're going to see India become super progressive in a lot of different ways. And just like we have cities here in America where it's like New York City is like a concrete jungle over floating water, and then in the same area, like in the middle of the United States in the Midwest, it's these large barren plains, not a lot of developed land, or like development in terms of like crazy developed cities. Same thing's gonna happen in India. You're gonna have these crazy cities that are spurted all throughout. Like Mumbai is a great example of this, and then you have other cities that are not gonna be as, you know, city like Mumbai-esque. I'm very fascinated to see where this goes.
How did the British manage to
After 20 years, India will become something else. Yeah, I'm very excited to see where India is going. Now I also have money invested in it because of the stock market. So I have financial reasons that I would like to see you guys kick ass. But I'm very interested to see music, culture, games, like all of it. Like Bollywood was fun. We watched some Bollywood trailers last night. We saw Liger, the one with Mike Tyson in it. It was pretty good. I liked it. It made me real excited to watch more.
unmake all of that? The fundamental principle of the British has been to make the whole Indian nation subservient to the interests and benefits of themselves. And so, once the British took power, they changed the entire dynamic of the Indian economy to suit their own interests. The first step, dismantling all native industry. To start, they established a legal monopoly over Indian textile goods and cut off the export market, which
I think this is literally the same play-by-play that they did over here in the States with Native Americans. Could be wrong with this, but this kind of seems same but different.
immediately disrupted long-standing trade links. Having now made themselves the exclusive buyers of Indian textiles, the British then changed the way that they paid for those goods. Instead of using foreign currency, they paid using the tax revenues extracted from India. The Indian economy stagnated and prices collapsed. Skilled artisans, who once fueled the vibrant Indian economic engine, were now
Wow, this is literally the same.
significantly poorer and more restricted than ever before. And it didn't stop there. Soon enough, British manufacturers lobbied their government to completely eliminate the competition from the Indian textile industry. See, despite the restrictions imposed on Indian industry, British manufacturers were still finding it difficult to compete with Indian products. Company soldiers were sent to smash Indian looms. According to several different accounts, they even went around breaking the thumbs of weavers so that they could no longer ply their trade. But
Bro, it's the... Oh my god, dude. The British... fucking British history is dark. British history is so dark and bloody. Oh my god. You guys are already building a city like Singapore in Annam and Nicobar Islands. Ooh, sweet. So I don't know if you've seen this, Omni, but maybe I replied to you. If this channel, for some blessed reason, blows the heck up, I cannot wait. I would love to go to the islands, to just go snowboarding, to see the city. Oh, and the food. I don't want the crazy street food. I know you guys have some amazing actual good food over there. I know, because we have Indian food over here, and it is.
But that's not all. To ensure that the Indian textile industry could not recover, adapt, or innovate itself back into relevancy, the British imposed an absurdly harsh 80% tariff.
Yeah, we had a whole revolution because of this.
This had an immediate catch-22 trap
I think it was called the Boston Tea Party.
effect. Exporting goods from India to the UK was now economically unviable.
Yeah, I think we could all agree over here, India, the United States and India could be dab up and be like, yo, Britain's kind of a son of a bitch, right?
Remember, Indians were restricted from selling to anyone else. Similar restrictions were imposed on nearly every
You have a plot on Adamdam and Nicobar? Nice. Okay. Okay, so in other words, if I go out there, we're going to get some drinks, going to get some food.
branch of manufacturing in India. India was reduced to being a mere exporter of raw materials, like cotton and metal ore, so that the British could sell finished products back to Indians at a premium.
Damn. Dude, Britain.
Conquered
That's dirty. That's real dirty.
India as an outlet for the goods of Britain. I'm not such a hypocrite to say that we hold India for the Indians. The colonial deindustrialization process was
Sir William Hicks. What a hell of a name, huh?
so complete that by 1947, only 0.7%
Trump and Modi are good friends. You know what? Trump says some wild stuff, but you know what Trump appreciates? Trump appreciates life. And it's so funny that you think Trump appreciating life. What do you mean? He talked about like environmental things. He talked about like these giant windmills, and he's like, they're so bad for whales. And people are like, what are you talking about for whales? They had to go and like do some things. These windmills are causing vibration and it's messing with the freaking whales. He was asked like, hey, what is your favorite like farm animal? And he said a cow. He thinks they're cute. He thinks they're good animals. They're good producing animals. Kind of mind to themselves. You listen to him, you're like, dang. And when he talks about war, he's like, no more killing. It's people. We don't need to sacrifice any people. And I feel like Modi is probably in a lot of the same, but different.
Percent of India was
I don't know, but you've seen it in my other videos. Definitely Team Modi. He seems to be like the most positive force for India and pushing it in a much positive direction.
employed in any form of manufacturing. But skilled workers had to go somewhere, do something. The British monopoly on industrial production drove Indian artisans, merchants, builders, and others into agriculture en masse. In the words of Dr. Charles Hall, India's population has been thrown back upon the soil because Britain's discriminating duties have ruined every branch of native manufacture.
You know what? And too, it's probably like the British people, the people that live there, probably had no interest, no desire to do this to the Indian people. But it's the bureaucrats and politicians and people who have these big corporations that don't look at people as people anymore. They look at them as like tools and commodities for them to generate revenue. That's it. Just numbers on a spreadsheet, baby.
Wages cratered to historical lows, and in fact, the land itself could not
Modi likes to make jokes. Oh, see, anybody that likes to joke around, the world is already damned enough, y'all. Make somebody freaking laugh. Spread love, not hate. Make somebody laugh. Don't make them cry, unless it's because you made them laugh so damn hard.
sustain the influx of newly disenfranchised workers. Poor seasonal harvests and droughts gave way to catastrophic famines and mass poverty. With most Indians now converted into peasant cultivators, the British sought to exploit them further. They began to tax cultivators as the primary revenue source for the administration. Taxes were extreme, pegged at 50 to 80% of gross income, and calculated before the harvest.
Yo, they're trying to do this in California. Are you dumb?
Result? Indian cultivators often owed more in taxes than they earned as income.
Yeah. I feel this right now.
The British knew how harsh this really was.
Like, not actually, not that it's extreme, because this is insane.
They openly conceded that they were imposing the highest tax rates in the world, and that taxes were more than 3 times higher than they had ever been under Indian rulers. To add insult to injury, the British even bragged about it in Parliament.
God, this makes me I look at French history and I look at British history, English history, and it makes me so mad. So mad.
Indians have been taxed to the utmost limit. Every province has been made a field for higher exaction, and it has always been our boast how greatly we have raised the revenue above that which the native rulers were able to extort. Colonial taxes were so burdensome that 2/3 of the population in directly ruled British areas fled to the hinterlands, where native Indian lords could at least minimally protect them from financial depredation. The millions who stayed behind could hardly afford to pay taxes, and the situation was worsened by the fact that the British did not negotiate tax payments. Horrors were perpetrated under the guise of sinless mathematical neutrality. Tax defaulters were confined in cages and exposed to the burning sun.
Dude, it's so messed up. It's so disgusting when you look back, and it's all for money, and it's just people in another country before computers were looking at their freaking scrolls and their little thing, and it's like, nope, I need more beads over here. I need more beads. This scroll isn't giving me enough beads. We need more beads. We need more money, more pints.
Fathers sold their children to meet the rising rates. Vulnerable peasants were physically tortured to pay up, and when they didn't have the means to pay, the British confiscated their farmland for themselves. Tens of millions of landless peasants were created for the first time in Indian history. By the end of the 19th century, India was Britain's largest source of revenue by far, its largest purchaser of exports, and a source of highly paid employment for both British civil servants and soldiers.
Man, they looked at it like it was fucking Nvidia stock or something.
And they were all paid for by Indian taxes. Many British officials freely acknowledged the exploitative nature of the colonial enterprise. In fact, a prime minister of the UK,
It literally is like the blueprint to what they kind of did to America, and they just kind of tweaked it along the way. And they're like, okay, we can't make it as extreme.
the Marquess
I mean, we still threw a revolution for it.
of Salisbury, himself admitted, as India is to be bled of money, the lancet should be directed to those parts where the blood is congested. And just like that, India and its people were bled dry. The fundamental issue of British overlordship was the fact that the British had no intention to become one with the land or to rule it as their own. The British saw India as innately and eternally foreign, and this justified their creation and maintenance of what scholars have referred to as an extractive colony. For comparison's sake, consider the Turkic peoples who invaded India and eventually formed the Delhi Sultanate and the Mughal Empire. Look, the Mughals were no heroes. They imposed unequal taxes, engaged in religious discrimination, plundered local treasuries, visited great violence upon their enemies, and exhibited
Yeah, all these seem like real bad things.
a Persianized racial arrogance. But one thing is clear, India's wealth was preserved at a foundational level. After nearly 2 centuries of Mughal rule, India
Yeah, because it never left India. It stayed here. And with all the extra trade, all that money stayed here. It never left to go all the way over here that you can't even see on the map.
was still a dominant economic power, responsible for 27% of global trade. There's a simple reason for that. See, the Mughals had a foreign place of origin, Fergana, but they did not repatriate India's resources to their original homeland. India may not have been Fergana, but it had become their new home, and so their loyalties and energies were owed solely to India. Meanwhile, the British ruled India as disconnected tyrants. The bulk of the revenue from India wasn't reinvested in India. No. It was extracted and repatriated to their distant, foggy homeland.
You can't even see it. Look, you can't barely see it over here. I mean, this like can't even see it. It's disgusting. It's all like the 7 human sins of lust, envy, greed, gluttony, all of that. It's disgusting.
How much?
Literally, that's right. Before the British Empire took control of India, it was under the East India Company, aka a giant corporation. Always goes back to the dollars, the pesos, the pounds, the crows, the rupees. It always goes back.
Modern economists have estimated that the total amount of wealth that the British extracted from India is in the ballpark of $43 trillion. Yes, $43 trillion. When taxes are not
Never mind, that was Black Widow.
spent in the country from which they are raised, they constitute an absolute loss and extinction of the whole amount withdrawn from the taxed country. The money might as well be thrown into the sea. Such is the nature of the tribute we have so long exacted from India. Apologists for colonial rule often point to the railways as some sort of extravagant counter to the argument of extraction and divestment.
No, that's just the logistics of how they did their distribution. It makes it even more gross.
But as modern scholars have pointed out, the railways serve as evidence for how exploitative and inefficient British investment in India really was.
Come on.
First, there's the bold assumption that Indians would not have built railways, like the Japanese or others.
And I'm pretty sure they were kind of leading in mathematics and look at the architecture, the artwork, the intricacy. I think they would have figured out locomotives.
Either by importing the technology or by developing their own. India had been far too advanced and cutting edge of civilization to not keep up had it been given the opportunity to do so. When the British came to India, the country was the leader of Asiatic civilization. Japan was nowhere. Now, in 50 years, Japan has revolutionized her history with the aid of modern arts of progress, and India, burdened by 150 years of English rule, is condemned to tutelage. But let's ignore that for now. Initially, the Indian railways were positioned as a grand investment scheme for British shareholders. The government guaranteed substantial returns of at least 5% per year, and when the revenues were not enough to pay out these returns, Indian taxpayers covered all the losses. Because of these taxpayer-backed guarantees, construction of the railway
Oh my God! It's got happening, or it was happening, where it was American. If you were a legal immigrant, you come over here. The American people are gonna pay for your food and everything, and it's like, where is our money going? And for this, it's saying, hey, guess what? If you invest in our project over there, we're gonna pay you. We're gonna pay you 5% return, and if we can't, don't worry, we'll take their money and we'll pay it to you. And you turn around, and you're like, the fuck did he just say? Oh my God.
railways was extremely inefficient. Here's a fun stat. Every mile of Indian rail cost 18,000 pounds to construct, as compared to 2,000 pounds for the same mile built in the United States.
Wow.
All the elements of railway construction, steel, wagons, gears, engines, and more, were produced by British manufacturers. Indians weren't even given an opportunity to produce their own manufactured alternatives because the British government imposed restrictions that prevented Indians from competing. Worse still, the essential purpose of the railways was to assist the British enterprise in the exploitation of the natural resources of India. In fact, the railways made it possible for the British to export enormous amounts of grain.
They're like, we ain't able to extract this fast enough. We need something faster than horses and carriages. What do we need next? Let's go ahead and get a railway system and get this bitch constantly going overnight. We don't need to worry about sleep. Just all coal, all gas, all fire. Choo choo.
And other agricultural products, which sparked and exacerbated famines. Over the course of British rule in India, an estimated 35 million preventable deaths were caused by famines. That's millions more than those killed under Stalin or Mao, and that's 5 times more than the Holocaust. The British were directly responsible for this. They mass exported Indian foodstuffs to Britain and other countries in Europe, even during drought periods. Food in India became too expensive for peasants to afford. According to Dr. Charles Hall, India starves so that its annual tax revenue to England may not be diminished by $1. There is plenty of grain in India. The trouble is that the people have been ground down till they are too poor to buy it. The British had no interest in provisioning for Indian lives. Famine non-intervention was official government policy. How ironic, given that heavy-handed British intervention and market manipulation is what sparked the famines in the first place. And when good people, Indians and foreigners, worked together to help famine-affected peasants, the British government made efforts to stop them. They were furious that the government's own failures were being highlighted.
It sounds a lot like kind of what's happening in North Carolina and FEMA, to where if you wanted to go up and help them, you can't. You get stopped. You have to go out on ATVs and go around the trails and like make your own ways to go help people because the government doesn't want to be seen as incompetent.
Don't believe me? Listen to this British officer in his own words. Scores of corpses were tumbled into old wells because the deaths were too numerous for the relatives to perform funeral rites. Mothers sold their children for a single meal. Husbands flung their wives into ponds to escape the torment of seeing them perish from hunger. But amid these scenes of death, the British government in India was unmoved. Newspapers were persuaded into silence. Strict orders were given to civilians.
And this dude with his freaking tie on thinks he's the sophisticated one with this freaking stupid. Ugh. Just thinking about it. India got independence in 1700. How much we would have done if we could do this much in 76 years. Then think about India would have taken the advantage of the Industrial Revolution with cheap labor. It sucks because you guys would be so far ahead now. But like I said, I'm very excited to see where you guys will be in 20 years. I think America's in a great place right now. But I think once upon a time, the 3 great powers were Russia, China, and America. Now I think India is going to take one of the spots of Russia or China, and it's probably going to be Russia.
Do not acknowledge that civilians are dying of hunger. And if you think that Indians would have done a worse job, consider this. There hasn't been a single large-scale Indian famine in the 70-plus years since British rule ended. Not one. Independent India has its flaws, but it has been overwhelmingly better at providing for the care, safety, and prosperity of its own people. And now you know.